item of business is Public Petitions Committee debate on motion 23316 in the name of Joanne Lamont on improving youth football in Scotland. May I ask those who wish to speak in the debate to press the request to speak buttons, and I call on Gail Ross to speak on behalf of the Public Petitions Committee. Ms Ross is speaking to us remotely for up to 10 minutes. Please, Ms Ross.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It's an honour to be opening this debate on behalf of the Public Petitions Committee in my role as Deputy Convener. And it's actually rather timely with Scottish football being at the forefront of many of our minds. The recent success of our national team and the joy and pride it has brought to us all highlights just how important a role football plays in our society. Now, this debate follows the publication of the committee's report on petition PE 1319, Improving Youth Football in Scotland, which draws on over 10 years' worth of evidence gathered by the committee. And the scale of the evidence received across 3 different sessions of Parliament is indeed a stark reminder that it is the longest running petition currently being considered by the Public Petitions Committee. And can I take this opportunity to thank everyone that gave evidence and to our clerks for a very thorough report. Now, recognising the issues raised by this petition are fundamentally about the protection of children and young people within professional youth football, and I take no pleasure in reminding Parliament of this particular petition's record. Just over 3 years ago, the convener of the committee, Joanne Lamont, led a debate on youth football, highlighting serious concerns the committee had about the registration period for players in the 15 to 17 age group, the payment of compensation costs and the appropriate payment of the minimum wage to young players. And while our report highlights some progress within the system, I am disappointed to be saying 3 years on that significant and systematic issues remain, which have the overall effect of weighting the system too far in favour of the professional clubs. And without a doubt, this leaves children and young people involved in youth football disadvantaged in terms of the choices that they wish to make. And these views echo that of the former Commissioner for Children and Young People in Scotland, Tam Bailey. During his time in office, Mr Bailey undertook a substantial amount of work on the regulation of youth football from a rights perspective. And I wish to thank Mr Bailey for the significant role he has played in highlighting these important issues. The committee was concerned that the current Commissioner confirmed earlier this year that the issues raised by his predecessor have not yet been resolved. But having said that, I do welcome the briefing that we received today from the Children's Commissioner, stating that he agrees with all the recommendations in the report. Now, Presiding Officer, before I go on to discuss our conclusions and recommendations, I wish to place on record a heartfelt thanks on behalf of the committee to the petitioners, Scott Robertson and Willie Smith. The time and effort they have dedicated to make a positive change to the world of youth football is to their credit. And although I will focus on what the committee considers to be the challenges that remain in youth football, it is important to recognise what has been achieved, which is in large part due to the sheer tenacity and determination of the petitioners. The fact that young people registered with football academies can now play for their school team, and the recent work the SFA has undertaken to prioritise the well-being and protection of children is to be welcomed. The time it's taken to make these changes, however, is not. The committee considers that the pace of change demonstrated by the football authorities throughout the lifetime of this petition has been unacceptably slow. And whilst it's clear that the petition raises a number of issues for the football authorities to address, there is also a key role for the Scottish Government to ensure the rights and well-being of all children and young people are protected, regardless of the environment in which they are in. And this, of course, includes youth football. The committee notes the positive engagement the Scottish Government has had with this petition, as well as its willingness to work with football authorities to deliver the best outcomes for children and young people in the academy system. We further note the preference of the Scottish Government to wait for changes within the system to bed in before any consideration is given to further regulatory action. Now, recognising the deep-rooted child protection concerns raised by this petition, and indeed the wide range of evidence the committee has gathered, The Scottish Government must now take action to work with the SFA and the SPFL to evaluate all the measures that have been introduced and to investigate the impact of the changes recommended by the committee. Now, turning to those recommendations, Presiding Officer, let me first address the issue of registration periods. Now, currently players in the 15 to 17 age group are signed for a 3-year registration, which differs from those in 10 to 14, which is on an annual basis. Now, the rationale for the greater length of the registration period for players aged 15 was explored extensively by the committee, and reasons put forward included the physical and social development of players, the benefit to the club and the structures of youth teams in this age group. Taking everything into account, the committee considers that this setup simply means the balance of power is stacked heavily in favour of football clubs, rather than in the best interests of the child. So we therefore recommend that players under the age of 16 should not be required to sign up to a system that ties them into a multi-year registration. And it is encouraging to note that the SFA plans to review these rules, recognising the negative consequences that they can carry for young people. While the committee welcomes this commitment, we do so with an element of caution. Indeed, the committee understands that previous work by the SFA to review the rules in 2015 resulted in no change. So we therefore encourage the SFA not to rehearse previous discussions, but to put in place fit-for-purpose rules on player registration. Closely allied to the issue of registration is the question of compensation payments that may be made when a young player moves from one professional club to another. And the committee heard a wide range of evidence on this issue. And this included how compensation payments are a FIFA requirement, and that they are calculated using a matrix to identify what the acquiring club is required to pay, and they are based on the value of the training that the club would have provided up to the relevant point in a player's career. Now, the committee takes no issue with this principle. Reflecting on further evidence we gathered, however, we believe that it would be fairer to make a compensation payment only when a player signs their first professional contract. This, as the committee understands it, would still be compliant with FIFA rules. Presiding Officer, a further focus of the committee's work was around whether payments to young footballers who have progressed to professional contracts have always complied with minimum wage legislation. And evidence the committee received highlighted instances where clubs had been found to have made payments at levels that were not compliant. So the committee tested this issue with the SFA at the beginning of the year, and we were encouraged that work has been done by the football authorities to address this issue, but we do consider that there is scope for more work to be done in this area. And this could include annual sampling of contracts to provide an extra level of assurance that clubs are acting in accordance with the minimum wage legislation. And we are firmly of the view that unless further changes are introduced to the youth football system, Parliament will continue to raise questions about how children and young people are protected within this environment, and whether it is now time for external, independent regulation. This point is not a new one. The Health and Sport Committee have previously highlighted to the Scottish Government that it is, quote, the overriding duty of the SFA, unquote, to eradicate any perception of a power imbalance, and recommend that if this is not forthcoming from the football authorities, legislative change is required. And I also wish to highlight calls made by the Children and Young People's Commissioner for Scotland earlier this year that statutory measures were now required to ensure that children's rights were protected effectively. And we note that it's very encouraging that the Minister for Public Health, Sport and Wellbeing support for our recommendations, and we look forward to hearing in detail today how he intends to act on these for the benefit of all young people involved in the game. I also note that he intends to liaise with the Office of the Children and Young People's Commissioner to have a meeting with the SFA and the petitioners on this issue as soon as restrictions allow, and the Children's Commissioner noted this in his submission as well. Presiding Officer, it would be remiss of me not to recognise that we are all living in unprecedented times. in response to the ongoing COVID-19 public health emergency has forced us all to adjust our ways of working to get things done. Our report recognises this point and encourages the Scottish Government and the football authorities, alongside the petitioners and any other relevant stakeholders, to identify ways to address the issues raised in the report during these challenging times. COVID-19 will not be with us forever. Our hope as a committee is that the issues raised in the report are actively addressed now, so that when things do return to some form of normality, systems and processes are in place to ensure the rights and well-being of young people are at the heart of youth football in Scotland. I move the motion in Joanne Lamont's name. Presiding Officer.
I now call on Joe Fitzpatrick for up to 8 minutes. Please, Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and thank you to the Public Petitions Committee present and obviously the previous members for their work on this inquiry over a large number of years and for securing this debate. And I welcome the opportunity to discuss this issue and respond on behalf of the Scottish Government. It's also important, as Gail Ross did, to pay tribute to Willie Smith and Scott Robertson, who lodged this petition way back in 2010. And to echo the words of the committee, their passion and commitment in pursuing this issue has been commendable. And it's particularly commendable that they are sticking with the petition. And in terms of, I'll talk later about the meetings that we intend to take going forward, but Scott and Willie are very much part of that ongoing discussion. Presiding Officer, we know that this has been a long-running issue, the longest-running petition, as we've said, since the Scottish Parliament was established. The committee first took evidence on the 20th of April 2010 and held a number of sessions, hearing from a wide range of individuals and organisations who have an interest in this complex topic. It was therefore no surprise that those discussions and deliberations explored a range of issues connected to youth football. Many new issues emerged and were considered by the committee. For countless children, being a footballer is the ultimate dream. Many of them will have dreamed of scoring a goal in a cup final, or pulling on the dark blue of Scotland, or saving a penalty in the last minute, or dancing with the Scotland teammates and singing "I Will Boogie." But for the vast majority of children, that is all it is. It's a dream. And the chance of becoming a professional footballer is vanishingly small. However, children are still determined to pursue that dream, whatever the odds. And it is the responsibility of us and football authorities and others to make sure that they can do that safely. Presiding Officer, I think most members, particularly members of the committee, will be familiar with the background to this. Under the Scottish FA procedures, the registration of a player for the age group 15 allows a club to extend the player's registration forward to the age group 16 for the following season. This can happen again at age group 16. The key issue is that the club, not the child, can terminate the registration at any time. Clubs make a significant investment in the development of young players. The registration ensures that clubs receive compensation should the child move to another club within the Club Academy Scotland setup. Those two issues are, I believe, at the heart of this long-running debate. After just over 10 years, the committee published its report on the 22nd of June. The duration of consideration, the committee itself recognised, reflects the seriousness with which the issues raised have been addressed, the complex nature of some of these issues. The key issues from the committee's report for the Scottish Government were around the power imbalance, which Gail Ross mentioned in her opening statement, which must be eradicated by football authorities, and that we should work with the football authorities to consider the professional youth football system in detail and the impacts of any changes made to date. And I think it is important to recognise that over the course of 10 years, this has not been stagnant. I absolutely hear the the Deputy Convener and the committee's concern about the pace of change, but I think it is important also to recognise that there has been change and that the football authorities have engaged on the agenda that the committee has brought forward. But it is clear that unless further changes are introduced, external and independent regulation should be introduced, was another of the conclusions of the committee as outlined by Gail Ross. So I think... Yeah.
Joanne Lamont.
I just wonder if you could clarify whether it's the Scottish Government's position that should there not be any further progress, that regulation should be necessary.
Joe Fitzpatrick.
So I'm just about to come to what our position in response to those points are. So, like the committee, the Scottish Government, I think it's really important that we highlight the work that the changes which have already been made. I think that is important. But like the committee's report, we recognise that progress having been made to protect children and young people within the football system, in particular, the opportunity of the Club Academy Scotland players to play recreational football, as well as the establishment of young players' wellbeing panel. So these are things that I think it's really important for us to recognise, and we welcome the other encouraging steps taken by football authorities. However, we do recognise that there remains concerns. We agree with the committee that ensuring children who play football are able to, I quote, participate safely in a safe environment should be an absolute and overriding duty for the Scottish FA, the Scottish FA Board, and the Scottish FA Board recognises and shares that view, and the Scottish Government and Sport Scotland will continue to ensure that we do everything to make sure that that commitment is met. I have many meetings with members of the Scottish FA, and I can assure members of the committee that at all levels, from the President, from Ian Maxwell, the youth leader, at all levels, it is absolutely clear to me that there is a real desire from the SFA to meet that commitment. But clearly, we need to make sure that that commitment is met, and it's met clearly right across Scotland. So we agree with the committee that enough time has passed to consider whether changes made to date have been effective, and we'll consider how best to assess the system and the potential impact of any recommendations proposed by the committee. Having considered this issue in depth over a period of time, including requests for external regulation, we will continue to consider how we might introduce greater external independent oversight into the existing system, should that be necessary. And I think that I hope addresses the point that the convener made. Let me be absolutely clear. The welfare of the child is absolutely paramount, and that should be the main considerations of all of us, and it is non-negotiable. As I've already said, it's tough to make it as a footballer, and most sadly won't make it. However, I believe that the system can have the welfare of the child at the heart of its considerations, making sure even those children who don't go on to become professional footballers or go on to join the Scotland team have a positive experience which they can take into their adult life and into the workplace and beyond. I believe a balance can be struck which does ensure that we can protect the child's welfare while also encouraging clubs to invest in developing the next generation of elite Scottish footballers. Presiding Officer, my officials are continuing to discuss the issues with stakeholders, and as the Deputy Convener mentioned, we intend to meet with the Commissioner's Office, the Scottish FA and the Petitioners. I think it's the Commissioner's Office which is actually facilitating and pulling together that roundtable discussion, and that will happen as soon as it is safe to do so. Together, drawing on the work undertaken by the committee over the past 10 years, I'm sure that we can ensure that the system has the rights of the child at its heart. Presiding Officer, I once again want to thank the Public Petitions Committee for a considerable piece of work, and to the petitioners themselves for securing this debate on this important issue. Thank you.
Brian Whittle, up to 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer, and I am grateful for the opportunity to open this debate on behalf of the Scottish Conservatives And as you know, Presiding Officer, this is a topic that I have a deep-seated interest in, and should declare that I still am a senior coach, and I've also coached in several senior football clubs. As Gil Ross said, it's especially pertinent given the recent success of the Scottish men's football team in qualifying for the Euros, following on, of course, from the ladies' success, I should mention. Huge congratulations to all the team and staff for breaking that fast. However, if I can make a personal plea to the team just once, please, could you get there with a little less drama? But it is a very timely reminder of the impact that sport can have on the nation. I think the whole nation exhaled as one when David Marshall dived to save that last penalty in a penalty shootout, and I'm pretty sure it registered on the Richter scale. Kids all over the country will now be dreaming of being able to emulate their heroes, to play for their country and fantasise about saving that penalty or scoring that all-important last-gasp winner. It has ever been the case. I spent some time alongside Joanne Lamont in the Petitions Committee, and I think it would be fair to say that progress on this petition had been frustratingly slow, and evidence sessions were sometimes quite heated. And I recall specifically one with the Chief Executive, who I afterwards met with him off-site, which I did appreciate, and we managed to try and at least put across some of the points in a less heated fashion. I think it seemed to us, though, that those who should have influence on this particular issue were reluctant to take any kind of responsibility. It seems to me that certain individuals and bodies have had to be dragged kicking and screaming to the table. And I would use the example of the Children's Commission, who only recently accepted, I think, that there's a problem having taken a bit of a roasting at committee for their non-committal and quite unacceptable response to questioning during the evidence session. And, Presiding Officer, it has to be said, I think, that the written response from the Minister on behalf of the Scottish Government to the committee report, I think, shows a lack of understanding of the issue and a reluctance from the Scottish Government to take any kind of positive action. I think this is from a government who wants to get it right for every child. Well, Minister, how can you ensure, as it says in your letter, that the Scottish Government and Sport Scotland will continue to ensure that their children can participate safely in a safe environment, when the report clearly highlights that that environment is far from safe in the first place? And I have to ask what the role of the clubs are in all of this, because obviously it's taken 10 years to get to this point, and I think there's a real dragging of the feet, and I think the clubs are at the centre of that. But what I would say to the Minister is the real issue is quite simple. It's about attitude. Any coach, team or national governing sports body's responsibility is primarily to the health and well-being of their charges. That is fundamental. Parents hand their children over to a sport with the notion implicit in their decision. Now, I would highlight that the majority of coaches, clubs and sports bodies take this extremely seriously and do so very well. However, as the petition report suggests, this is not an approach that is universally accepted in football. I have always been concerned about the way in which some professional football clubs pick up young footballers only to discard them further down the line. And it cannot be overstated how devastating it could be for a child of 12 or 13 to be picked up by a professional team with all their hopes and aspirations right there in front of them, only to be discarded without any kind of support. That is not what I would define as looking after a child's well-being. The practice of picking up players to prevent other teams getting them was investigated, as well as has been mentioned before, transfer fees for children. Lack of proper wages for young players on a contract seems more common than the governing body would care to admit. Now, I recall being told by the Chief Executive that it was up to the child to report their club if these rules were breached. How many children would wreck their football dreams to report the club that they play for? I think Head and Sand comes to mind here. All these practices are completely unacceptable, however rare or otherwise they are. The system should not allow it to happen, and I can tell you that I cannot think of another sport which would tolerate such treatment of its young participants. What we want from our sport is a pathway from early years all the way through to international level, with all the many points along the way for various talents and abilities. As the Minister mentioned, fewer than 0.1% of sports participants will reach international level. So for the vast majority of players, participation, although a passion, is actually just a hobby, a way to interact, to be included, to be physically and mentally fit and healthy. The support has a responsibility to every player, no matter which level that they play at. For those who try to hit the highs of professional sport and don't quite make it, there has to be a better system than just to be discarded. There must be support for all players to remain in the game in some capacity, and surely that would be to the benefit of the sport as a whole. Presiding Officer, this petition should have been closed long ago, and it would have been closed long ago had all those with a part to play been reasonable in their approach. However, a decade on, and here we still are. How can it be so difficult to get a sports governing body which receives significant government funding to treat participating children with the rights that they are entitled to? The power balance in football is all wrong, and it is open to breaking the rules far too easily with what seems to be complete immunity. The Scottish Government, I've got to say, is culpable here because of its refusal to roll up its sleeves and get involved. Getting it right for every child, certainly not in this case. Now, I recognise that progress, however slow, has been made by the SFA and the SPFL over the peace, but it is time these issues were properly dealt with. Trading on the hopes and dreams of children is entirely unacceptable. Deputy Presiding Officer.
David Stewart, please, for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I'm delighted to open this important debate for Labour. And as with many members today, such as James Kelly and Liam MacArthur, I'm a lifelong football fan. I followed Inverness Cali Thistle since their inception. And youth football has played a vital role in their success, growth and development. And I'm honoured to chair their charity arm, the ICT Trust, and refer members to my register of interests. I want to congratulate Joanne Lamont and Gail Ross and the other members of the Public Petitions Committee for their sterling work on this crucial petition. I've long been a strong advocate of the Parliament's groundbreaking petition system, so admired by legislators across the globe. In 2011, as the new convener of the Petitions Committee, the petition before us today was one of the first that my committee considered. And I want to place on record my appreciation of the dedication, commitment and steadfastness of the petitioners. During our tenure, PPC took evidence from the petitioners, asked the view of the Scottish Government and held face-to-face meetings with the football authorities. Everyone agreed that youth football was a key component in the development of the Scottish game. The crux of the matter was ensuring that young people have their rights and their interests protected. So the evidence of unfair or restricted terms and contracts were key. We also welcomed the impact of the Children's Commissioner, who at the time was Tam Bailey, and I'd like to thank him for his contribution to the Petitions Committee. And also, we took on board the legal implications, such as the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child and Section 1.1 of the Age of Legal Capacity Scotland Act 1991, which affects the ability of under 16-year-olds to effect contracts. So improving youth football in Scotland has been the result of many years' hard work by the committee following the petition from William Smith and Scott Robertson. We, of course, in Scottish Labour welcome support the conclusions and recommendations in the report. But of course, Presiding Officer, as parliamentarians, we have a dual interest in this issue. Firstly, we have the responsibility to use the scrutiny and legislative powers that we have to ensure that children who are part of professional youth academies are adequately safeguarded, especially when it comes to re-registrations and contracts. And secondly, we have an interest in ensuring that Scotland's best young footballers are able to thrive and grow to reach their maximum potential as athletes. With these responsibilities in mind, the committee concluded the two key changes due to occur within Scotland's professional youth football system, ensuring players under 16 should not be bound by multi-year club registrations and changing the system for the reimbursement of training costs so that compensation is only paid when a player signs the first professional contract. These changes would ensure there's a fair balance between the rights of professional clubs to operate their youth academies independently and develop the players they choose to develop, and the rights, on the other hand, of children and young people not to be bound to multi-year commitments so that themselves and their families are able to most freely make life and sport choices in their best interests. Important these changes, which involve the Scottish Government and footballing authorities to work closely together, would be compliant with FIFA's regulations. This is because Legislative intervention will be sought for the purpose of protecting the rights and well-being of children and young people, and that reimbursement for training costs is specifically compliant with FIFA regulations. So we welcome the work the SFA has done over the previous decade on these issues and the commitments they've made. But the report, and I share its conclusions, make clear that more has to be done. As the committee concluded, the governance of Scottish football shown, and I quote, a lack of urgency ensuring that systems are in place to put the rights of young people at the heart of decision-making. So I want to congratulate again Wayne Smith and Scott Robertson for bringing forward the initial petition and making Parliament aware of these issues, which led to so much good committee work over the past decade. I note their submission in June of this year, and I quote, the publication of the final report on the 22nd of June was a major milestone in our journey. We were delighted with the contents and the language, sends a clear and strong message to the Scottish FA and the Scottish Professional Football League. They are clear, the committee is clear, and I am clear. The footballing authorities have to act upon the conclusions and recommendations of this report. All of us want Scotland's national team and clubs to thrive and succeed. No doubt we will in the European Football Championships next year, where I expect Ryan Christie to star, a product of Inverness County Thistle Youth Academy. But we also want all boys and girls who aspire to become footballers to have maximum flexibility to decide when to join and leave youth academies, as is their and their families' rights. If the recommendations to support are implemented in full, the balance will be correctly struck. And finally, as Kofi Annan said, there is no trust more sacred than the one that the world holds with children. There's no duty more important than their rights are respected and their welfare is protected.
Thank you very much, Mr Stewart. And I call on Liam MacArthur. Up to 4 minutes, Mr MacArthur.
Thanks, Deputy Presiding Officer. I'm too delighted to take part in this short debate on youth football in Scotland. Like others, I pay warm tribute to Scott Robertson and Willie Smith for their tireless efforts, and commend Petition Committee members, both past and present, for their work over the past 10 years on this issue. While I've not been directly involved in the committee's work, the Chamber won't be surprised to hear that this is a subject very close to my heart. Thanks to my two sons, I've been heavily involved in youth football in Orkney over the past decade or so. My TV includes coaching roles with the Bury Boomerangs, the Bury Hotspurs and East United. And I've even managed to pick up a few SFA coaching qualifications along the way as well. It's been a hugely rewarding experience, and I'm delighted that the development in the sport at a local level, overseen by OIDG and enabled by so many parents and volunteers. Not only has this given boys and girls in Orkney the chance to develop their skills, confidence and friendships, it's also contributed to improved physical and mental health. At the more elite end, I would also wish to put on record my thanks to Ross County and David Stewart's beloved Inverness County Thistle for the time and commitment they've put in supporting football in the island. Many Orkney youngsters have gone on to represent both teams at youth level, though the concerns raised by Brian Whittle about how players are subsequently let go are certainly ones I would recognise. Before turning to the other specific concerns highlighted by the committee, however, I just wanted to make a plea based on my experience at this level of youth football. Yes, safeguarding the welfare and well-being of the young boys and girls who play this, and indeed any other sport, is absolutely paramount. But we also must ensure that safeguards are indeed proportionate and effective, not simply box-ticking exercises that do little to safeguard and tie up clubs and volunteers and bureaucracy, forcing many to give up and thereby reducing the opportunities available for young people to participate. I would make a distinction here, though, with the issues the committee has been rightly focusing on. These relate to contractual arrangements around youth football, which have given rise to very serious and very real concerns. As the committee acknowledged, the legal status of professional SFA clubs entering into contracts with children under 16 is a matter for the courts to adjudicate. But there seems little doubt, as the committee concluded, that a club holding a player registration retains some control over the choices of that player. Promises by the SFA to review registration rules have so far come to nothing. Concerns too have been raised about the social, educational, psychological effects, not to mention the legality of SFA clubs prohibiting young players from taking part in extracurricular activity. Oversight of this again appears to have been inadequate, while progress on compensation payments and adherence to minimum wage requirements has been frustratingly slow. Deputy Presiding Officer, I really have no desire to see Parliament or government meddling unnecessarily in Scottish football, particularly at precisely the moment when we are starting to look forward to the prospect of our senior men's team taking part in their first major tournament in the lifetime of this Parliament. But we can't ignore what the committee concludes has been a, quote, reluctance or lack of urgency in ensuring that the rights and well-being of children and young people is at the heart of policy and decision-making within this sport. I thank the Petitions Committee again for their diligence. I thank most warmly Scott Robertson and Willie Smith for their tireless efforts, and hope the Government can now make the progress we need to see, working alongside the football authorities to address the serious shortcomings identified in the committee's report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr MacArthur. Open debate, 4-minute speeches with little time in hand for interventions. I call James Dornan, to be followed by Rachel Hamilton. Mr Dornan, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. As a non-member of the Public Petitions Committee, I'd like to place on record my appreciation for the work of the convener, Joanne Lamont, Gail Ross and the rest of the committee for their hard work on this issue. But I'd mostly like to say thanks to the petitioners, Willie Smith and Scott Robertson, who I've had the pleasure of getting to know over the last few years and who have recently been strongly supported by Lee McClevy. They've worked tirelessly to keep the protection of young footballers at the forefront of people's minds. Over this past decade, they brought a campaign before numerous committees, involved the Scottish Government and local authorities, secured the support of the Commissioners for Children and Young People, and have forced the SFA and SPFL into taking much needed action. They truly do deserve our thanks. Presiding Officer, without a doubt, this report is a milestone, but it needn't have come this far. The football authorities could have listened to the findings in Tam Bailey's report in 2015. They could have listened to the Health and Sports Committee's report in 2017. Or they could have listened to children, their families and the campaigners. And I've said to the Chamber many times, my entire life has been steeped in football as a fan, as a coach and manager of youth football teams, and a father of 2 sons heavily involved in football. My experiences and passion for the sport, coupled with my determination to stand up for children and young adults, has meant I'm fully supportive of the aims of the petition. It's been clear that things have needed to change, as over the years we've been hearing about children under the age of 16 entering into contracts with professional clubs, children under the age of 16 being paid as little as £1 a week, and children unable to move teams as their club is blocking a move for more compensation. And even worse, children having agents who had no background checks carried out beforehand. The system is tilted far too heavily in favour of the professional clubs, and it's abundantly clear to me that children have not been treated as children, they've been treated as commodities. I find the report utterly damning for the football authorities. I would like to turn now, Presiding Officers, to some of the recommendations made in the report and what needs to happen as a result. As we know, footballers at all levels require to be registered with the SFA in order to play regulated football. For players aged from 10 to 14, the duration of registration is a year. And this has been already stated, for 15-year-olds, the duration can total 3. Now, I agree with the conclusion of the committee, the views I've held for years, that the 1-year registration period should be extended to 15-year-olds. How does a 3-year registration, for example, support the aims of child protection? We've heard far too often of historic issues of abuse continuing at clubs because the young person was too scared to say anything in case it meant the end of their career. Imagine that child had to suffer this abuse, not just for 1 year, but for 3 years, solely because the club want to be able to hold on to a child's registration. It's simply not acceptable and should be stopped immediately. The SFA continuously claim that compensation rules are a requirement of FIFA, which national bodies cannot divert from. I don't believe this to be accurate, as many countries, including Denmark, Sweden and Portugal, do not have any such rules. Real change will not happen so long as clubs can request compensation payments for children, and children and young people can be held to 3-year registrations. Unfortunately, I remain deeply unconvinced that the SFA and the SPFL will do the right thing in their own accord. I therefore urge the Scottish Government to consider introducing greater external, independent oversight into the existing system as soon as possible. Within the Scottish Government's response to the report, they recognise the progress regarding the establishment of a young player wellbeing panel in 2014. And yet I've heard from petitioners who believe this panel has only been used twice in several years, and apparently it's a very arduous experience which mimics a judicial process. How does holding such a hearing in such a way promote the best interests of a child who moodily wants to leave a football club? I'd encourage the Scottish Government to carefully consider whether these panels are fit for purpose. Presiding Officer, and I'm coming to a close, 4 years ago I took part in the committee's deliberation of the petition. 3 years ago I took part in the debate. And of course, this has been on the Parliament's radar for over 10 years. Let's hope we don't have to wait any longer for meaningful action by the football authorities. And I want to finish by saying thank you again to Willie Scott and Leigh for running this campaign. Without them, we would never have got to this important stage in the first place, and let's not keep them waiting too long. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Dornan. I now call Rachel Hamilton, to be followed by Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and thank you to the convener and to the committee for bringing this very important report forward after so many years, as James Dornan has just highlighted. For many people, young people, football is a passion, and an offer to join a club set up is a dream come true. However, the reality can be, as we've heard from many contributions today in the Chamber, that it's far from this. Young players all too often find themselves stuck in contracts which do not pay them fairly, and sometimes not at all. And when this subject was coming up in public petitions, I was actually on the Public Petitions Committee, and I was very keen to hear the witnesses. And I just can't reiterate how important it is that we are discussing this and that the SFA do take all of the comments that they've heard on board today. But, you know, progress on improving rights for young footballers has been too slow. We need to recognise that unless the power imbalance between clubs and young players is addressed, there will continue to be issues. And I'm just so glad that the committee have decided to tackle this issue, which is long overdue. And turning to the findings of the actual Public Commissions Committee, the committee found that there are significant issues with youth football system that weigh the system too far in favour of professional clubs. It is acknowledged that leaving children and young people in the position where they find themselves disadvantaged in terms of choice. They may wish to make a choice regarding their footballing ambitions, but are unable to do so. Hearing from parents in the borders who have seen their children go through great disappointment and anguish because they've been left unselected for a professional team with very few other alternatives is demoralising, and this is perpetuated by the issue of players being prohibited from participating in their school teams in addition to their club team. For example, I was told that if a player wanted to play in the school team on a Friday night, it would mean that on the next day they wouldn't be able to play for their professional team on the Saturday. So they're almost being discriminated from actually joining in both the sports and enjoying the company and the collegiate effort and the team that they want to play in both. But one father I spoke to told me that his son had binned his football boots in anger after putting in hours and hours of training over many years, only not to be selected. I used to be a netball umpiring coach when I had a little bit more time before politics, and it's obvious that dealing with the expectations of young people and disappointments has to be managed very carefully, and also give young people hope, because there are easier pathways to lower leagues so that you don't put people off for life. But the upset and damage I believe that this can do to young people's mental health is far-reaching, and it takes a toll on parents too. Parents are driving all over Scotland to different matches with no financial assistance whatsoever, and it's really, really stressful. And I just only have to speak to my constituents to find that out. There have been many incidences where clubs have failed to pay the minimum wage to youth players too. In 2015, a Sunday Post investigation found that at least 5 clubs in Scotland's top 2 divisions were not paying the national minimum wage of £2.73 per hour, which I believe was shocking. Whilst the committee accepted that work had been done to try and address this issue, there is scope for authorities to do more, such as annually sampling contracts. When young people and their parents are giving up so much time and effort, often compromising their studies and their bank balances, it is unfair that there is not ample financial support. And just to conclude, on another point, which should be actioned to help young people balance studies, work and football, is the waiving of the requirement for under-16s to sign multi-year contracts. And I want to thank, as many people have today, Willie Smith and Scott Robertson for lodging this petition. We all know the time it's taken, and it's been commendable that they've continued with their efforts to do this, which will set a clear set of recommendations for the Scottish Government to implement. There has been progress made over the years. but we must encourage more people to take up football.
Thank you. Kenneth Gibson, followed by Willie Coffey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I congratulate the committee for securing this debating time, and most of all, William Smith and Scott Robertson for bringing this petition more than a decade ago. Scotland is a footballing nation, and the results of our men's and women's national teams have at last improved in recent months. Football has been an inherent part of our culture for generations, with many professional, amateur and youth clubs providing vital community hubs to countless people across Scotland. As a result, many boys and girls in Scotland dream of following in their footballing heroes' footsteps and embarking on a professional career, or at least being able to play for their hometown club. There are many positives to this, including improved confidence and social skills, as well as the benefits of frequent physical exercise and improved mental health on young people's well-being. Football academies are a proven asset to local communities, although Willie Coffey is listening, I will say that UEFA's social return on investment model, for instance, demonstrated that Ayr United's football academy contributes almost £10 million annually to the local community. Yet we know football has become big business, with players, including teenagers, potentially having a market value of millions of pounds. In recent decades, it's become common practice for big professional clubs to woo young players away from their local youth clubs. Talented children and young people must be protected from the potentially negative consequences of the football industry by putting in place robust systems with the overriding aim being the well-being of young players. Few footballers really make it in the professional world, and broken dreams and crushed ambitions can have very serious consequences for young players who don't secure professional contracts and are subsequently released. I welcome the progress made since Petition 1319 was lodged in March 2010, thanks to petitioners' passion and commitment. It's particularly encouraging that Club Academy Scotland players can now play recreational football, and that a young player wellbeing and protection department has been established, overseen by an independent advisory board and chaired by the Chief Executive of Children's Scotland. I also commend some of the more recent work undertaken by the Scottish Football Association, such as a publication of Child Wellbeing and Protection Strategy. This covers a period from 2019 to 2024 and is aligned to the Scottish Government's framework for supporting children and young people, tied under the commitment of Scottish ministers to review the registration rules in relation to 15, 16 and 17-year-olds. I am, however, concerned by the committee's conclusion that, and I quote, "Somewhere within the governance of football in Scotland, there has been a reluctance or lack of urgency about the core issue of ensuring systems are in place to put the rights and well-being of children and young people at the heart of policy and decision-making. If true, it's also unacceptable that the football authorities may have attempted to sit out many of the problems highlighted in this petition until the conclusion of the committee's work. Too often the current system seems weighed too far in favour of professional clubs, while young players are at a disadvantage when it comes to reconciling their football ambitions with other life choices. In order to see our young people flourish, more changes must be brought about which put players' welfare at the centre of decision-making. These include measures to ensure that players under 16 are not forced into a system that ties them into a multi-year registration, as well as changes to the reimbursement of training costs. Compensation payments should only be required when a player signs their first professional contract. Making these changes is primarily the responsibility of the Scottish Football Association, as well as the Scottish Professional Football League. However, as the Scottish Government has engaged extensively on the issues highlighted by the petition over many years, I expect Scottish ministers to work with the SFA and the SPFL to conduct an evaluation of all the steps introduced to date and analyse potential impacts of the measures suggested by the Petitions Committee. Presiding Officer, we all want to see our football players and clubs be successful. This must happen within a culture that respects the rights of young people and a system which supports their well-being at all times. I'm confident the Scottish Government is listening and will ensure greater external independent oversight is introduced into the current system, which is not serving our young people as well as it should.
Thank you very much, Mr Gibson. I call Willie Coffey to be followed by Tom Mason. Mr Coffey, please.
Thanks very much, Presiding Officer. As somebody who actually watches football and has watched Kilmarnock Football Club for over 55 years, I'm happy to offer a few words on the subject of youth football. But first, congratulations surely to the national team under Steve Clarke, a Kilmarnock legend, for taking our country back to a major championship next year, the first since 1998. Our bonus of reaching Group A in the Nations League fell short at the last couple of hurdles, but I'm sure we're on the right road under Steve's leadership. A 10-year-old petition must be a rare thing, Presiding Officer, but here it is. And some of the young players of the petition had in mind when it came to the Parliament in 2010 may well have been playing for the national team in the past week. Reading the committee's report, I can see the frustration there on a number of issues. not just on the lack of clarity in things like the registration process, but on the lack of progress in resolving them, or even clarifying what it all means in practice for youngsters and their families. I have to say, I was confused myself when I read through the evidence sections on the registration issue. When a youngster signs a registration form with a football club, a FIFA and therefore an SFA requirement, I believe, it does appear that it confers on that club some rights to retain the young player's services, if they choose to, even if that player wants to go somewhere else at the end of the particular year the registration covers. If that's right, surely it can't be acceptable. It sounds like a contractual condition and has been applied without the knowledge or consent of the youngster and their families. Mr Robertson, one of the petitioners, commented that if someone signs a registration form when they're 15 and they complete that commitment for 1 year, the club can hold them for a second year, and the player has no say in that. He has no get-out clause. If at the end of the second year the club wants to keep them for a third year, it has the power and the authority to do that. The player and the parents have no say. That sounds like a contract to me and wasn't countered by any of the others who gave evidence. But we hear this all the time in football. Clubs are retaining a player's registration, which has often led to severe financial detriment and loss of freedom for the players concerned. In that area, Presiding Officer, I would agree with the committee that this needs to be sorted out, but by whom? Should it be the SFA? Should it be the government? Perhaps even a legal challenge to sort it, rather than the government involvement, which we all know has never been welcome in football circles anywhere. Other areas of the petition, like accountability of public funds, compensation payments for transfers and the need to focus on the well-being aspects for our young players, have been well covered by other members. And I know clubs like Kilmarnock are doing a really good job with our youngsters in that regard. I've met some of the young players over there over the years, and they're well looked after by the club. The Kilmarnock Youth Academy is a great success story and has brought several players through to the first team squad and on to international caps for their country. Greg Taylor played for the under-17s and under-20s at Kilmarnock, then went on to play for the first team and, of course, Scotland. Chris Boyd, Stephen Naismith and Cammy Bell before him too. Presiding Officer, I must admit, though, I liked the committee's statement in paragraph 12 when it said, after 10 years of waiting for progress in some of these areas, that time is up. One of the great strengths of this, our national parliament, is that the people of Scotland can come here, raise an issue and see their elected members taking action if they support the ideas in the petition. I think the committee's report has made a valuable contribution to some of the issues relating to how we support youth football in Scotland, and I sincerely hope that the players in it that are affected by it today haven't retired from the game by the time any of its recommendations are implemented. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Coffey. I call Tom Mason to be followed by Stuart McMillan.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. This petition comes to us for debate after a decade of consideration by the Public Petitions Committees over the last 3 parliaments. So I hope, one way or another, we will be able to make some progress today. It does not take a rocket scientist to figure out that young people, the length and breadth of the country, love our national game and relish the opportunity to play whenever they can, whether that is kicking the ball around in the street or even in the school playground if they're still allowed to do it, or at the highest levels of the game. However, as this petition and the committee's report argues, there is an imbalance between the young players, the clubs that can result in some being caught in exploitative contracts and not being paid fairly for their efforts. I came very late to this whole issue, and I was shocked to realise just what was going on and the impasse had taken so long to resolve. Now, I found myself in a bit of an old-fashioned situation in seeing sport as something that one should be done for enjoyment rather than money. But if youngsters can get to do both, then all power to them. With that said, I welcome the findings of the report and the apparent degree of consensus on the changes needed to improve protection for young players at club level. It is clear these have taken far too long, but I hope that the solutions identified can be implemented at a much faster pace. This is not to say the development of young player welfare has not been static since the petition was lodged. The SFA's establishing of a Wellbeing Protection Department, in addition to a 5-year child wellbeing protection strategy launched last year, are both welcome and commendable steps. But there is need to go further, and I will focus my remarks on a couple of specific areas. One of the key issues that the petition presented was around the overall system of player registration. The effect of multi-year registrations on players over the age of 15 and the extent of the control that a club can have over the player. This is a particularly important point, especially for players who have not yet turned 16. To be tied into a multi-year registration means they could find themselves stuck at a club that is neither not helping their development or keeping them on the books with no prospect of a contract in the future. Enabling single-year registration for 15-year-olds who are by definition not on the professional contract would enable players and their families to make the best decisions for their own career prospects. In addition, concerns have been raised over the apparent failure of the minority of clubs to pay a minimum wage. On this point, I am encouraged by the work that has been done into the monitoring process. But I do think additional auditing to ensure uniform compliance should be the case going forward. Presiding Officer, talented young people deserve the chance to play football in a safe environment that protects their well-being and prevents exploitation from taking place. In order to make that more of a reality, the committee report identifies multiple areas where improvement is necessary. And I hope the SFA and the Scottish Government work together for delivery for these changes. As the events of the last week prove, our national game, and particularly our national team, can inspire the entire country. I hope, however, we celebrate victory as opposed to just the entry ticket. I hope these changes will be implemented as soon as possible, and in so doing make it easier and safer for the next generation of players to try to emulate their heroes and as high as their talents can take them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr Mason. I call Stuart McMillan. Mr McMillan is the last speaker in the open debate.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, I welcome this debate, but at the outset, like others, I would also like to commend the petitioners for their determination to make a positive difference for every young person who plays football in Scotland. I'd like to thank colleagues past and present who worked on this petition. It clearly was a tough task, but it was important to progress. Now, clearly, as we have already heard, there is still much work to do. I would like to commend actually the speeches from Liam MacArthur and Willie Coffey today, because I think that they have been extremely useful and helpful also in today's contribution. I think when a child wants to participate in any activity, and also in this case football, the delivery of it is extremely important. And also those who actually do that delivery work are trusted, and also they also need to be trusted. With football also being the national sport, and therefore many more children participating in football, that aspect of trust is crucial for football in Scotland, and therefore I mean, the whole football game in Scotland needs to ensure that its house is in order. Clearly, progress has been made, but there is still much work to do. We all want to see young people flourish and to have the opportunity to be happy in what they choose to do in their future. And some will go on to represent Scotland at their chosen sport, and also in this case football. But the majority will actually use the experience to actually better their life chances. And ultimately, we want to create a country and a culture that respect the rights of children and support their well-being. And I know that the Scottish Government has engaged extensively on the issues raised by the petition over many years, and certainly the Scottish Government do recognise the importance of the rights of the child being observed at all times. But like the Public Petitions Committee, the Scottish Government, I'm sure, also must recognise that progress has to be made to help protect children and also young people within the youth football system, and particularly the opportunity for Club Academy Scotland players to now play recreational football, and the establishment of a young player wellbeing panel. Presiding Officer, many years ago when this issue was first raised, I felt some sympathy for any young person actually caught up in this situation. In addition to them training and playing in the organised way with a club, having a kick about with your pals or playing for your school team is also a natural thing to do. They will actually be one of the areas where a young person gets a chance to actually improve their footballing skills. And I'm pleased that the Scottish Government actually agrees with the committee that ensuring children who play football are able to participate safely in a safe environment that should be an absolute overriding duty for the Scottish FA. The Scottish FA Board recognises and shares that view apparently in the Scottish Government and Sport Scotland. I hope are certainly going to ensure that this commitment is actually met. But this is crucial, and certainly as work still needs to continue, that sharp focus on delivering it must apply. And I know that the Scottish Government agrees that enough time has passed to consider whether changes made to date have been effective, but certainly that work still needs to happen, and that focus still needs to be there. In addition, having considered this issue in depth and over a period of time, including the requests for external regulation, the Scottish Government apparently are going to continue to consider how to introduce greater external and independent oversight to the existing system. That's crucial, because we need to have that trust in how football is delivered in this country. And I genuinely welcome the work of the Petitions Committee of this Parliament. Presiding Officer, football brings many highs and lows, as any footballing fan has had over the last week, and particularly for fans of the national team, it happens all the time. But we truly want the sport to be the best it can be, and also to be that best opportunity for our young people. And this is where I think the petition that has been delivered through the Parliament and the work that's still underway on it, I very much welcome, and to the two petitioners, I thank them for their hard work and their efforts.
Thank you very much. And I call on James Kelly to close for Labour. 5 minutes, please, Mr Kelly.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. Can I first of all begin by thanking the petitioners, Scott Robertson and Willie Smith, for continuing to pursue the issues in this petition over a period of 10 years. Can also thank the committee themselves for the work that they've done on this important issue. You just need to go back to last Thursday to see how important football is in Scotland. You know, that victory last week over Serbia gave the country a real lift, and it shows you the extent to which football reaches out across the country. And there are a lot of benefits that football has in terms of bringing supporters together, allowing players, amateur, professional, young and old, to participate in important benefits around health and well-being. And I think it's against that context that we need to stress the importance of looking after our younger football players, looking after their well-being, as the Minister said. And I think against that backdrop, it's a real concern that 10 years down the line, we're still talking about the issues in this petition. And the reality is they've been going on in football much longer than since the petitioners brought these issues forward. I mean, it's shocking to think that young kids are exploited and they're not even paid the minimum wage by some of these football clubs who are well off to say the least. And the committee heard extensive evidence around that. The registration system that Liam MacArthur spoke about, and the way that young players were basically tied into registrations by clubs, is just totally unacceptable that young people at such a young and vulnerable age should be treated that way. And Dave Stewart also identified the issue around the compensation payments, and I think as one of the people giving evidence to the committee said, it was creating almost like a kind of transfer market, which is an unacceptable way for both clubs and players to be dealt with. And I think what all of these issues show is that, as Gail Ross said in her opening contribution, the balance of power is all wrong here. The balance of power rests with the football clubs, and for too long, young players have not been treated properly. So I think the issue that the committee brings to the Parliament is, after 10 years, what do we do now? And there are two sides to it. There's the football authorities and the government. And as Brian Whittle and Kenny Gibson said, in terms of the football authorities, the SFA and the SPFL, there's clearly been an unwillingness to take any responsibility around this. And it's not good enough for the football authorities, when it all goes well and we qualify for a major tournament, to take all the plaudits.
but when we've got these fundamental issues at the grassroots of the game, they absolutely fail to address them and just completely ignore them over such a long period of time. That's simply not good enough. And that's highlighted by the Children's Commissioner, but the Children's Commissioner also turns to the other issue about what should the government do around this. And, you know, Willie Coffey applauded the petition system at the Parliament and how it was great that we were able to bring these issues to the Parliament. But the fundamental question you've got to ask with this is, what are the government and what are the Minister going to do about it? And I found the Minister's opening remarks, I'm sorry to say, were an inadequate response. You know, when Joanne Lamont intervened, the response was, well, we'll consider the issues, you know, we'll think about it. Well, for 10 years for all that, we need to know what you're going to do. So there are two things I think the Minister should do. First of all, use your leverage. I constantly hear in media reports, when I'm listening to the sports news, about how the football authorities have got another important meeting with Joe Fitzpatrick. So, you know, you've got your ear, so get them to act on these issues, for goodness sake, Minister. And secondly, set out what the government are going to do in terms of regulations and legislation, because it's a scandal that these issues have been going on for so long and that our young people have been so badly treated. And we let them down as a Parliament and a government if we can't take the issues identified in this report and do something about it.
Thank you very much, Mr Kelly. And now call Maurice Corrie to close for the Conservatives. Mr Corrie, also 5 minutes.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. As I say, I stand here and close on behalf of the Scottish Conservatives and welcome the report. And we welcome the report that was published by the Public Petitions Committee and support the recommendations. I'm indeed pleased to speak in the debate today as a member of the Public Petitions Committee, and this petition has certainly stood out in terms of the wide-ranging issues that it's raised, which the petitions have sought to address since 2010, some 10 years ago. And I hope the publication's report will go some way to encourage further action and implementation of the recommendations for the sake of young players who deserve the opportunity to succeed. After all, football, for many young people, as people have said in this debate already, is a passion, and particularly in Scotland. This petition has turned a spotlight on the importance of protecting young people in their pursuit of football in Scotland. It has presented the Public Petitions Committee with an important and extensive issues within the SFA that I know have been explored carefully and sensitively by past members of the committee and the clerks. And I'd like to join my colleagues in thanking the clerks for all their hard work in organising and collating submissions, reports and letters of the committee, and moreover to all those who took part and took time to write and submit written and oral evidence. These submissions have served to explain and detail the processes and policies underpinning youth football clubs in Scotland, which has been most appreciated and also has revealed many things. I join my colleagues in welcoming the committee's report and its recommendations, and I welcome the children and young people's support of the report too. Steps have been taken in more recent years to update and improve the youth football system for the purposes of greater clarity and enhanced security for young people. And the SFA's creation of the Wellbeing and Protection Department and its accompanying strategy last year, for example, is a welcome move, but not before time. And I hope this will, in practice, promote the highest safeguarding standards transparently and across every level. And moreover, I recognise that Youth Football Working Group will help to ensure young players are no longer stopped from joining school football teams and alongside their own club. Also, and although the committee feels this enforcement needs to be checked regularly to ensure it is applied across the board. And further checking has also been recommended in relation to the minimum wage rules, with previous reports of failings on the part of some clubs to pay their players the minimum wage has been recognised by speakers today. And I know that the SFA have worked to target this systematically, but they need to do an awful lot more work. But perhaps more frequent inspections of player contracts could enforce this more strongly, and again needs to be addressed by them. And the lack of clarity surrounding player registration has been of a particular concern to the committee. And I think it is understandable youth players and their families might be under the impression that the registration process is, in effect, the same as signing a contract. Even if this is not, in reality, an employment contract, the power of the club in holding of a youth player's registration does leave the player without some control and agency in following through with their own decisions. And we've talked about the power balance again this afternoon, and this has got to be changed. This has been the case with the questionable 3-year registration period for over 15s, and with rolling annual registrations, young persons face uncertainty at the will of their clubs, who in turn have the authority to keep their registration, therefore restricting them to an amateur level and not allowing them to progress. This has risked preventing young people from pursuing plans and their dreams of professional clubs, and therefore the real worry is that they can essentially hinder their development and limit their potential. And I do welcome the SFA's announcement, nevertheless, earlier this year of a working group to review such rules of this age group. However, I am aware that the last review, undertaken 5 years ago, resulted in no meaningful change to date. And as a committee member, I do hope the next review will consider adapting the registration process with the greater clarity and much needed balance. And also, as I say, the SFA and FPFL could take cognizance of this. And to conclude, Deputy Presiding Officer, I share in the frustration of my colleagues at the slow and perhaps reluctant pace of the change in youth football procedures in the SFA, and surely young people are deserving of greater protection and agency than they have received in the past. And for this to happen, decisions must be made on the part of the Scottish Government on how independent oversight can take place. And I look forward to greater detail on this. And indeed, the external oversight may be the best way to ensure that safeguarding standards continue to be met consistently, with the full resolution of any concerns which may call a young person's well-being into question. And finally, a big thank you to Willie Smith and Scott Robertson for bringing this petition to the Scottish Parliament 10 years ago, and I commend them for doing so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Corrie. I now call on Joe Fitzpatrick to close for the Government Minister. 6 minutes.
Thank you, Presiding Officers. So this debate this afternoon has emphasised how important football at all levels is to Scotland. As the contributions have highlighted, most of us are football fans and we all want our national game to flourish. I want to particularly thank Willie Coffey for his contributions, which was grounded in a deep understanding of the game at all levels, and I think it was a very helpful contribution. Presiding Officer, I think from all of the comments, we know that we all want our national team to succeed, and we all want clubs at all levels to succeed. And it's quite it's interesting when sometimes people talk about Scotland's football clubs as professional football clubs, and other times they talk about them as community clubs. And generally, the community clubs are your ones and the professionals are the other boys. All of our clubs are so important to our communities, whatever size they are, from the Rangers and the Celtics right down to the amateur game and the women's game. All of these clubs play a huge role in communities all across Scotland. And we all, I think, want these clubs to succeed. The ambitions, I think, are compatible with safeguarding the fundamental rights of a child, protecting their welfare and human rights. Of course.
Neil Finlay.
The Minister might recall, I'm not sure if he was on the Health Committee at the time, but the battle that we had with the SFA regarding child protection measures, and they were very reluctant to take responsibility for that and act on that, trying to pass the buck to other people. What confidence can we have in the SFA taking on this issue seriously and bringing about that real change now? Minister.
I thank Mr Finlay for his contribution, because I think it is an important point. I wasn't in the health team at the time that the member talks about, so I don't have that direct experience that he has had. However, I can say, and I think the personnel on the SFA have changed since those days. So I can only talk about the people who I have had very close relations with recently. So particularly the President, Rod Petrie, the Chief Executive, Ian Maxwell. I have confidence that them and their colleagues at all levels in football really care about the game, care about the importance of the game to young players. So yes, I have confidence, but I also have confidence in the process that we've said we would take forward, which I mentioned in answer to Joanne Lamont's intervention. So the Commissioner is in the process of convening a meeting between ourselves, the SFA, and themselves, obviously, and the petitioners. And I think my hope is that by taking it forward in that way, we're making sure that there is no buck passing, and that we've got everyone around the table, and we can take that forward in a way which, with a clear intent, I think, to listen very carefully to the contributions which have been made in the Chamber today, the findings of the 10 years of work that the committee has taken forward. I think that's all really important, and I think that process going forward is I think really important that we do that in that collegiate partnership way. So I think the fact that the rights of the child being really important is a message which I think has come across loud and clearly from all sides of the Chamber. So let me be clear that what I said earlier, the welfare of the child is paramount, and there is a complete consensus across the Chamber on that fundamental point. The football authorities and clubs are ambitious for on-field success. They want to have the very best players, and they want to be developing the very best players that they can. And children will do whatever they can to pursue that dream that many folk have talked about, and even if the odds are tiny in making it. Rachel Hamilton talked about the disappointment of a player not being selected, and it can be heartbreaking. I think anybody involved in any sport, they're involved often because they want to succeed. But it's imperative of all competitive sports to make sure that experience is positive, even if you're not able to be that tiny percentage, as Brian Whittle said, that goes on to the elite level of the sport. It's important that it's always a positive experience. So, as I said earlier, we need to strike the balance which safeguards the child while encouraging clubs to invest and develop in the next generation of Scottish stars. And those things are not insurmountable. And we've emphasised strongly to the Scottish FA and the SPFL throughout that the concerns on this issue expressed over the past 10 years and reflected in the committee's report must be taken seriously. Liam MacArthur and Rachel Hamilton both talked about the minimum age, and of course minimum wage is a matter for the UK Government, and it's a responsibility of HMRC to implement UK law relating to clubs and their wage structures. But that doesn't take away the responsibility from us in the Scottish Government and the SFA and SPFL. And the SFA and the SPFL both strongly encourage best practice across Scottish clubs, and I understand that the issues raised in the past have been resolved, and I really encourage any players who still have concerns to contact their club, the SPFL and the Scottish FA. The Players' Union, of course, and I think it's really important that we recognise that professional football players do have a union. The PFA Scotland is also able to assist. And I apologise, I'm running out of time. Dave Stewart talks about legislation, and I think it's a really important point.
I'm afraid you don't have an awful lot of time for Mr Stewart. It would be nice to have heard it, but you have run out of time.
Okay. Apologies. I think the
no, I gave you time to intervention. I did, Minister, so...
Okay.
Thank you very much. It's cruel, but it's just. I now call Joanne Lamont to wind up for the committee. Convener, please.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope to benefit from your justness and not cruelty, but we shall see. First of all, to say I'm very proud to have the opportunity to sum up what has been, I believe, to be a really important and very substantial debate. I want to thank the Deputy Convener so ably for laying out the case that the committee has made, and for the clerks who brought together such a range of issues into a coherent whole, which I do think represents an important piece of work that we want to see taken forward. And I'm conscious that as convener, I'm perhaps slightly more constrained in what I can say than usual, but I may drop a note to the Minister later about talking about going down to the women's game, but that is maybe for another time. I am struck by the extent to which across the Parliament members are agreed that these are important issues, not just for the footballing authorities, but for the Scottish Government as well. There have been very challenging speeches to the football authorities and to the Government, and I certainly trust, and I'm sure the committee trusts, that everyone will rise to that challenge. We know the role of football in our lives, and I believe profoundly that football at a local level, at a youth level, along with sport more generally, will have a critical role as we come out of the COVID crisis. I don't think it's possible to overstate how important that is and how important, therefore, that we support football at a local level to do that job. The petition is driven by the desire to ensure that young people can enjoy playing football at whatever level without becoming a byproduct of commercial interest in searching for the elite, that we abandon those who simply want to play the game, and that is our challenge. Whether you're a star who has come through the youth system or simply want to take part on a non-professional basis, protecting the rights and welfare of children and young people must be the #1 priority. It must, as Liam MacArthur says, not be a box-ticking exercise. This petition predates my time as convener and indeed, as has already been said, is the longest-lasting petition. Now, I want to say clearly that that's not out of some kind of committee lethargy, but because successive committees have recognised the significance of the issues. And if there has been lethargy anywhere, it has been in those, as Brian Whittle mentioned, who refused to take responsibility and, as Dave Stewart said, refused to show any degree of urgency when these matters were raised with them. And it has also survived because of the energy and persistence of the petitioners who have taken the word persistence to a whole new level, and I'm proud that this Parliament has been able to respond to that. The Minister talked about these issues being complex, but in truth, it is actually quite simple. There is a fear that what we were witnessing and are witnessing is the willingness of football clubs and the authorities to trade on the dreams and ambitions of young people and those who care for them, to encourage people to be explicit in their exploitation. There can be nothing more unforgivable. And what we have observed as a committee is that there is a huge power imbalance, and this has been mentioned, between football clubs and the young people who aspire to play for them. And it's a strong view of the committee, and perhaps it's surprising that it should even need to be said, that young people under the age of 16 should not be expected to sign exploitative multi-year contracts, that young people should be expected to be paid at least the minimum wage for their work, and that's the responsibility of all those to comply with the law, and that the system for reimbursement of training costs should be changed so that the compensation is required to be paid when a player signs their first professional contract. It seems so obvious, and yet it's taken years to get to the point where, in fact, there's a recognition of this. And I would have expected the Scottish Government to have a clear view by now of the support for these recommendations. I've heard what the Minister says, but I do think it's essential that there's a recognition that the offer of a meeting has to be on terms where you want to look at how these recommendations can be taken forward. There has been progress, but people should be aware that there's been claims of progress in the past, and that has also been mentioned. We have had concerns, and it's been emphasised, that the football authorities may have tried to sit out many of the issues raised in the petition until our work has concluded. If that was the strategy, it certainly has not worked. And I know that across this chamber, this work will continue. James Dornan made an important point. He mentioned particular wellbeing committees and whether they're effective. We don't know as a committee whether that is true, but it's essential that when progress is being made, that is then interrogated, that in fact in the real world is making a difference. And I am confident from what the Minister has said that the Scottish Government does not intend to sit this out either. Willie Coffey said that football is reluctant to see the Government intervening, but the truth is that should not be necessary. And what this petition has done has shone a light on practices in football which are simply unacceptable. And I think there's a recognition, as he said himself, that time is up. I think we should also note today the role of the Children's Commissioner, who has engaged now with this work and has provided a very important briefing to the committee, because the committee itself was critical of the view of the Children's Commissioner, but we should recognise that that progress has been made, and we should see this work in a broader context of safeguarding. And as was highlighted by Neil Finlay, this is work of that the Health and Committee itself took forward. It is essential in conclusion that the committee wanted to highlight a number of points. This question about responsibility, this question about accountability, this question about the imbalance of power, and seeing it in its broader context of the safeguarding of young people. It's not sufficient in answer to these questions to say, but we all love football. We have a responsibility to ensure that our football team progresses, but that at the heart of it, football clubs and footballing authorities understand their responsibilities. And I think the committee will look forward to have early sight of the work that's going to be done by the Scottish Government and the groups coming together. And I would urge the Minister not to wait till the crisis is over. Use the technology, get the meeting happening now to ensure that this important work that's been identified by the Public Committee, Petitions Committee, and has been recognised across this chamber and beyond, actually does make progress. Our young people, more than ever before, are relying on that work being done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms Lamont. And that concludes the debate on improving youth football in Scotland. And it's time to move on to the next item of business. There will be a short pause before we do so. Thank you.